You're listening to the First Fight Podcast, home of the people and stories behind the fight. I'm Jennifer Anderson, the host and creator. My goal is to give you a peek into the remarkable world of fighting and create a platform for fighters to tell their stories. In each episode of this series, a different fighter shares a transformative story of their first time. Welcome back, everyone. I have a great episode today. A good friend of ours, Nick Catone. I've been wanting to do Nick's interview for a long time. He's a good friend, a coach, former boss. He works with my husband, Corey, a lot. He owns Nick Catone's MMA and Fitness, which is just one of the best MMA gyms around. And I always wanted to hear his story about how he got started in fighting. And we talk about how his experience in Division I wrestling led him to Jiu-Jitsu, which led him to a bit of a dare that got him to fight for the first time. So we talk about that and his experience owning a gym, what eventually made him retire, and his new hobby of stock car racing. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks again for coming on, Nick. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy man. So you wrestled Division I. You wrestled for Ryder.
Yep.
And
wrestled Rutgers for a year, and then ended up transferring the following year to Ryder for my last 4 years.
Okay. And what made you get into MMA?
You know what? I was teaching at a wrestling club after I got done with college, and they used to do jiu-jitsu afterwards. And I knew the guy that was kind of running it, and he wrestled at my high school as well. And he knew I was a good wrestler, and he was always kind of, tried to talk me into trying jiu-jitsu, and wasn't really into it. And, the guys were all training with the gi on. And, so this went on for months, and he's like, come on, try it out. And finally, one night I was like, all right, I'll stick around, try it out, and I didn't really, the whole gi thing in the beginning, being a wrestler and stuff, was kind of a little weird to me. So I ended up trying it on, and then, I kept the wrestling shoes on, and that was, a lot of the guys were laughing at me for that, because I think I trained my wrestling shoes and the gi on probably for about 6 months, and then finally took them off, and now I'd rather be barefoot than with the shoes on nowadays. But it was just something that the first night I kind of got hooked, and next thing I know, I started going 1 or 2 days a week, and then I was going 3 or 4 days a week, and then next thing you know, I'm doing it every night. And they were like, "You gonna ever fight?" And I'm like, "Nah, I don't think so." I'm like, I've seen it on TV, the old UFCs and stuff, but I'm like, I'm not really into that. And then, after some time, about a year later, there was a card coming up, and the guys were, same thing, were always on me, like, you should fight, you do really well. And then, like, it was kind of more of a dare. The guys were kind of busting my chops in the gym, and I kind of was like, all right, let's do one. I'll do one, and it was a pro card. Wasn't any amateur, just went right into a pro fight. And it was at the minor league baseball stadium down in Atlantic City. And I think the Tap Out show was there. It was a pretty big show for our first fight. I think I had about 300 people come down and watch. And I did at a catch weight. I think it was 195. And ended up actually at the time it was Reality Fighting, which I think they still do shows up in more the Northeast, but not so much in Atlantic City anymore. And it was actually an octagon shaped boxing ring at the time, and ended up just pretty much getting a takedown and pounding the guy out. And then I think I ended up finishing with a head and arm choke. But it was one of those things that you just kind of, you get hooked, the adrenaline, all the people yelling, and just kind of took off from there. And I was number one in the police department trying to get hired in town. And I remember, it's just something that I just kind of picked up. And they were gonna give me a hard time about being able to fight and be a cop. And I ended up taking another fight. 2 weeks later was the Kimbo Slice Ray Mercer card. And Dan Miller got injured, so I filled in. They called up and they're like, "You want to fight?" I was still healthy, no injuries, and I was like, "Yeah, screw it, let's do it." And took the fight on 2 weeks' notice. I ended up fighting John Howard, who ended up being in the UFC. I think there was like 10,000 people there at Boardwalk Hall. So going from my second fight, pretty much 2 weeks after my debut, jumped on and ended up getting a decision win. And then eventually signed a 4-fight deal with Ring of Combat. And then just everything kind of snowballed from there. I had my first fight, and then so it was 16 months later, I ended up signing with the UFC. So it all just kind of happened crazy fast, and it was not something like I woke up and like, yeah, I think I want to be a fighter. Just started out kind of with kind of more of a dare, and just training casually jiu-jitsu. And I remember my first 4 fights, I didn't do any sparring or anything. I pretty much was just a wrestler with I knew some submissions, and I eventually got to the point where I was like, you know what, I think I could, take this serious and do something with it. And then I kind of evolved into trying to find a boxing coach and stuff like that. But it was kind of just kind of spur of the moment thing, just kind of snowballed and never ended up doing the police thing, and said I can always go back and take the test again, and ended up opening up a gym, and then things just kind of grew from there. So it just kind of started with teaching at a wrestling club. Mm-hmm. They did jiu-jitsu afterwards, and I knew the guy that ran it, and then just everything just kind of fell in place, and now we're 14 fights I ended up having in my career, and then opened up a gym and been a business owner for 10 years now. So it's been a fun ride.
Kind of remind me of Eddie with you were kind of pushed to fight and weren't really into it, and then it was like just happened.
Yep.
You really were along for the ride. Was it really nerve-wracking going into that first fight, or were you just used to it after competing at such a high level?
No, I remember being really nervous because, it's something new. You know what I mean? When I've wrestled thousands and thousands of matches, and now you're kind of venturing into something a little different where, I think in wrestling there's a referee that can kind of keep you safe. Nobody's kicking and punching you, and, if you get something bent up, there's potentially dangerous. They'll stop the match. But in fighting, it's you don't know if you're going to get knocked out, kicked in the head, and you don't know what the outcome could be. So it was definitely a little nerve-wracking. And then having not really a lot of experience sparring or anything. I just kind of was a wrestler that was actually pretty good at jiu-jitsu. I had some some good attacks and submissions that I like to hit, and just kind of winged it really in the fights. I just tried to get my hands on you and get you to the ground.
Yeah.
So that was it. And you could see over my fights, I started getting a little bit more and more comfortable on my feet. But my first 4 or 5 fights, I pretty much just the first 15, 20 seconds, I was trying to get my hands on you and get you to the ground. So, and then I evolved a little bit more over time, But it was definitely an experience. Like I said, outside, I think it was like 90 degrees out. The canvas was like so hot. I remember just taking the guy down, and my knees hit it, and his back was on it, and the canvas was hot, and everybody was yelling. Everybody was like literally running up to the ring, like the chairs were right there, so everybody was like banging on the side of the ring. It was I think it was 2000. I want to say 2008, 2007 or 2008. So. But there wasn't as many amateur cards and stuff back in the day. So it was, nowadays it's hard just to kind of jump right in the pro fight. I don't even know if the commission will allow you. But it was definitely interesting, and I remember the walkout. Coming out, Dan Miller actually wrapped my hands. I remember warming up in the locker room underneath the stadium, and then we walked out. And I always came out to Sympathy for the Devil was our high school wrestling song since the 1980s, and just kind of carried on a tradition. So I came out to that, and I just remember looking out and seeing a packed house, and it was pretty cool.
It's a rush, that's
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Did you get hit at all in that first fight? Do you remember the first time you got hit?
I don't think I did. No, I think he might have hit me once, maybe on his back, but I pretty much just moved around. I was able to kind of just shoot in. I took his back right away, and then he ended up rolling and kind of not pulling guard, but I ended up going in right into mount, and I landed some big shots from on top, and eventually I passed his arm by and finished with a head and arm choke in like a minute 30 seconds or something. So it was
Nice.
it was fast. And
Well, you're like a freak athlete with that high level experience, but you're also super competitive. So if any wrestler can like jump into fighting, it definitely is you. Who cornered you in that? Did you just pick randomly?
no, I had it was when I first started training jiu-jitsu. Bill Scott was the guy that ran the jiu-jitsu. I think maybe Dante Rivera.
Oh, yeah.
I think was in my corner, and I forget who the third was. But yeah, it was. I think I was 24, 25 at the time. I coached for a year or two at Ryder after I graduated, and then I got into helping out the wrestling club, and then that's how it kind of all fell into place. Mm-hmm. But it was like I said, wasn't something I planned. It just kind of happened, and then with the other fight coming up like 2 weeks later at Boardwalk Hall, just jumping into that, and then it turned out to be in one dare fight that was cool, and then another fight came up right away because somebody got hurt. I took that, and then I got hooked even more, and then it just kept going. So, and then just never looked back, and never ended up becoming a cop. So,
yeah. When did you kind of decide that you could do this as a career?
Well, I think I would say after probably my third or fourth fight, and then I won five of my 6 fights in the first round. So I think that's why the UFC was noticed me, because it wasn't just winning decisions. I was able to get in there and kind of dominate guys really with limited training, really just being a wrestler, jiu-jitsu guy, and really not doing any pads. I mean, I had guys take gi tops off to just like try to hold pads and stuff for me, and just jiu-jitsu guys that would move a little bit and spar with me, and then eventually kind of ventured out, started to look for guys that I can train with. But in the beginning, I really was just winging it, and I just found out it was something I was good at, and was able to kind of, like I said, win those first 6 fights, and then I got an opportunity with the UFC. I was supposed to fight originally Amir Sadala. He just won the Ultimate Fighter show, and I was 6-0 at the time, and I got in. We flew into Vegas. I had like 30, I think it was like 38, 40 people flying out there to watch, and I got off the plane and found out the fight was canceled. He had the staph infection, so I didn't get the fight. And then it was rescheduled. I think I want to say like 2 or 3 months later, and 2 weeks out he broke his clavicle, so he never ended up fighting. And then they got me a replacement. I got Derek Downey. He was from Idaho, brown belt. He trained with I forget his name. A guy that was in the UFC for a long time. He's one of his main guys. Made his debut against me also, and I was able to finish him and started off my UFC career that way.
You're one of those people, I feel like this is more so a thing out east than back home, but like there's certain people that have a ton of fans and support. Like you are one of those people that know everyone and bring a ton of people to your fights.
Yeah, I mean, when I was fighting, all the promoters, they loved me because I sold a crazy amount of tickets. I mean, it was like 300 to 500 people every time, but I was really one of the only guys in the area at that time, like fighting. It was me, Frankie, Kurt Pellegrino, Ricardo. Nowadays, with my guys fighting here, it's like I have 3 or 4 guys on one card. You know what I mean? So it's a lot harder for these guys, I think, to sell tickets.
That's true.
As compared to like when everybody would go every 6 or 8 weeks because I was the only one fighting. So everybody's like, "When's the next one?" And Where nowadays it's like, this guy's fighting, every couple weeks, so it's hard for people to pay and buy tickets and go all the time. I always had a good following. I think, through wrestling, and then, it was the fighting was starting to get, pretty big back then, and it was something for, people to do. It was always in Atlantic City, which is always a good time for people to go down and make a weekend out of it, and, excuse to go down and watch me fight. But, just having that support, and that always, that was always big too. You know what I mean?
Did you thrive off of that?
Yeah, that for sure. Even in the UFC, when I fought in New Jersey, and you hear people chanting, and you always kind of picks you up a little extra when you start getting a little tired, and it's you look over and you see all your friends and family there. I think it definitely plays a big part in helping dig deep when you need it.
And you eventually retired fairly young, I would say, right? I mean, you tell me about how you kind of came to that conclusion that you needed to stop.
Yeah, I want to say it was 2014, so it was about 7 years ago. It just got to the point where injuries just started adding up over the years. I mean, I've had quite a few knee surgeries in college, and then training more for MMA, I had the Achilles, and then I started having some hand surgery, shoulder, just wear and tear. I think from the Division I wrestling room to training 2-3 times a day for MMA, and then my back was my biggest issue that was starting to get worse and worse as I got older, and got to the point where I was getting 2 or 3 epidurals every fight camp, and it was just kind of masking the pain really, and it just got to the point where getting out of bed was a struggle, and I remember my wife saying to me, one morning, she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, what do you mean? What am I doing? I got to spar. I got to, fight in 6 weeks. And she goes, no, what are you doing? And then it finally, it hit me, and, it just got to the point where, I had to sit down and kind of tell myself, maybe, I'm getting a little older, and, I can't compete at the same level anymore. And I felt myself, I was taking more days off than I was training because of my back, and it was slowing me down. And to get in there and be able to compete with these guys and not training at your fullest all the time, and that was always a big thing, I think, for me too, mentally, is I always trained hard, and that's a confidence thing for me. And going into a fight knowing that I can't train like I want to or used to, I think would affect me. Plus, I really was just, the only way I can get in there would be to keep getting shots in my back to get me through the camps. And it's just, the gym was doing well, had a family. It was time to kind of sit back and think of things a little differently. And, it just got to the point where, the first time in my life I had to tell myself maybe I can't do this anymore. And it was a hard decision because, you work so hard to get to that point. I mean, it's only 500-600 guys on the UFC roster at a time, and you work so hard to get that level, and to have to walk away, because you're getting older and you're getting injuries was a hard thing to swallow. But I was able to win my last fight, in New Jersey with a lot of friends and family there. I tried to do one more after that, and I just got, I told my wife, I said, if I can't train without getting the shots in my back, then I'll hang it up. So I tried, and I got a few weeks into camp, and I finally announced that it was time to hang it up. I pulled from the fight, and after the one I won, I kind of had in the back of my head that I was done, but I never initially I made an announcement or anything. And then 4 or 5 months goes by, I was still kind of training, but not not crazy training like I'm in camp. And I remember hearing that they were coming back to New Jersey, and I'm like, I can do one more. And and until you actually start jumping into a camp and start training again, and then it hits you this is why I said I should I should have finished after the last one. I tried it, and I just got a few weeks in and said, you know what, I just can't. I can't do it anymore, and it was time to step away. And like I said, it was a hard thing to swallow, after working so hard to get to that point. But it was just the right decision, and I was able to kind of sit back and help kind of the gym and the business grow, and that was kind of that shifted gears, and that was my next goal, was to get the gym going, and that's been something that's I enjoy doing, and I wouldn't have it if it weren't for the fights and the wrestling, and it's all led to where I'm at now, and all those the injuries and all the stuff, and it's all kind of it's kind of paved the way, at the time all those injuries and stuff, I wouldn't trade it for anything, because I wouldn't have a lot of the things I have now, and have the business that I've grown over the last 10 years. And I remember when I first started fighting in the UFC, it was like, I think your first fight was like 3-3. It was like guys made like no money. Mm-hmm. So I remember borrowing money from my parents, close friends of mine, help pay my mortgage so that I could train full time. And then I eventually decided to open the gym, because I knew I can make some money, in between fights and stuff with the gym. And then eventually got to the point where the roles reversed, and it was time to concentrate on the gym and step away from the fighting. So, which like I said, I wouldn't change anything. I'm glad I started the gym when I did. Do
you think it would be where it is today if you didn't retire at that point?
You know what? I don't know. I probably wouldn't be, because I wouldn't been able to focus as much on it as I was able to once I did step away. So it's, like I said, it was more of a thing to make some extra money in the beginning, in between the fighting and stuff, because the pay wasn't that great when I first signed with the UFC, even though now it's not great, but the guys are making a lot more than, for your first fight in than I was, and guys like Frankie and stuff years ago. But, that I was able to kind of, I think, build up my business, my name, and the gym through fighting in the UFC. So, I was able to kind of brand myself and use that, to, even though I didn't make a lot, some of those early fights in the UFC, I was able to turn it into money coming in with the business, because people knew I was in the UFC and they followed me, and it helped grow my gym. And it was always tough to balance the fighting and run the business at the same time. But like I said, I wouldn't have changed it, because it was a good way to start out and grow the business in the beginning, when you're still active and competing, and you have other guys coming in to train with you, also in the UFC, and and it's all kind of led to where I'm at now. So,
well, you've done a great job. You probably would have. I feel like you're the kind of person that just will do anything, like to the limits, really well. But you've definitely done well for yourself. You have one. If anyone who's listening doesn't know that, Nick has one of the best gyms, I would say, in the world, for sure, in the U.S. It's
thank you.
Everything you do is like the nicest gym. You built, you grew it from a smaller gym to get to this point, but now there's people from all over the world that come here and train. Do you get fulfill that like competitive need coaching, or has your newfound hobby of race cars, what is that called? Stock cars?
Yeah.
Fulfill that?
No, I mean both. You know what I mean? I get just as nervous when my guys are fighting. I mean, that's the closest I can get is, cage side and walking out with them. You get the feeling again, but it's, nothing. It replaces what the feeling you get in the cage. Even wrestling, like I said, you've done it thousands and thousands of times. The fights, you only get to do it a couple times a year. You know what I mean? So that feeling, it's hard to match. And coaching, like I said, it's I still get the chills when you guys and whatever there, walk out and all that stuff. But it's hard. I miss it. I miss the competing a lot. And then I recently, like you said, I just got into stock car racing, which it brings a lot of those feelings back. I know a lot of the guys around me at the track, they all get really nervous and everything, but I think from being in the cage and that a whole different level of intensity does not, like, it's more of an exciting nerves when I get in the car. And I got
so you think it's less scary than fighting?
Yeah, I mean,
or just different?
It's different because I got 5 seat belts on. It's a helmet, like the roll bars. I mean, it's it could be scary at times. I mean, we're going 80 miles an hour, and then we got to hit the turn, and there's 24 cars on the track with you, so there's a lot of bouncing around and banging. And there was a guy this last week hit the wall pretty hard. He lost a hub and hit the wall at 65 miles an hour head on, and his car was destroyed. But I mean, he walked out of it with nothing. He was all right, just shooken up a little bit, but that's, anything can happen. You see cars get flipped over and go through the fence, but it brings back a lot of those feelings of being competitive, and I don't have to like really beat my body up training for it's not that sitting in the car in 100-degree heat in a fire suit is easy, but I probably dropped 10 pounds on a Saturday, but it's a different feeling, but the adrenaline is there, the competing, friends and family come, the crowd, and it's something I found that I enjoy, and I really haven't had, a lot of things since competing to, have fulfill those things that I feel like I lost for a while. And, coaching and all that stuff, it's, like I said, it's one thing, but being able to do it yourself and something that you can, enjoy and look forward to as far as, competing. I think the racing brings a lot of that back, and I know a lot of people think I'm nuts, but my wife included when I first started, but now she sees that I'm getting better, and I enjoy it and stuff, and that started out too. It was like a one night thing, and borrowed somebody's car and just literally just jumped out on the track and winged that too, and then I got hooked. And I remember when I walked into the garage, because we had to get my seat had to be welded and moved back to fit me in the car, and then the seat belts and all that stuff had to be adjusted, and they wanted to get me a fire suit that fit me. I remember the guys in the shop came up to me and they're like, "You sure you want to do this?" And I'm like, "Why? Is it like that crazy?" Or they're like, "No, it's extremely addicting." And I'm like, and then after the race, I was, it was like, even though I was out in the track, I wasn't, I think I got lapped a couple times, and I was just happy to be out there just tailing the cars and having fun.
I think Corey was there.
Yeah, he was there.
And I was like, don't you get him started on that, too. He has enough dangerous hobbies.
And I remember just being out there, just happy to be doing laps on the track that I grew up watching, there. My dad took me there since I was 6, 7 years old, and it's just something that I enjoyed doing, and a lot of it started after everything with my son. My son passed away. I didn't have a lot of, not that I didn't have, I lost a lot of interest. I was always watching baseball and the NFL and fantasy football, and I had a lot of things I always enjoyed and looked forward to, and I lost a lot of interest in a lot of things, and I couldn't watch TV anymore. I just kind of, the gym, kept me busy through a really dark, hard time. I was able to buy this building, and I worked nonstop to get this place opened up, and that kept me busy. But I didn't really have like a lot of, things at home and stuff that kind of, kept my interest, and I lost a lot of those. And a good friend of mine now, at the time, I didn't know him that well. I reached out, and after my son passed away, and he said that if you ever want to come to the track, it's on me. I'll get you tickets. He had a tragic thing happen with his brother and his family. That, in a race, his brother died with he got an accident with him in it. And I just said to my wife before Nicholas passed that I would like to bring the kids to Wall Stadium because I grew up going there, and then everything happened. We never got to go, but then it just out of nowhere, Jimmy Blewett reached out to me like a week after and had mentioned that about coming up to the track. So we started going and watch him, and and my dad came with me, and we started rooting him on, and we went for like several weeks. Every week we were going to watch him, and we became closer and closer. Exchanged numbers, and we started hanging out. And one night I think we were drinking, and he's like, "Why don't you try it out?" And I'm like, "I don't know, man. It's So I was like, "Come on, I'll get you a card." I'm like, screw it, whatever, let's do it. And he ended up getting me a car, and I literally just pulled up to Wall Stadium, sat in the car for the first time, went out on the track 20 minutes later, and started doing laps. And then I was just hooked. And shortly after, I ended up buying a car, and then.
See, this is what I'm talking about. It's not like coincidence that you just like fall into things. Like it's you. You will do well, I think, in anything you do. I could tell once you first started doing it, just seeing the way your eyes lit up talking about it. It was like, oh God, this is going to be like, even Corey was like, Nick's going to watch tape on it. He's going to get good at it because he's used to being like competing at a high level, and you just know how to, you don't know how to do it any other way, basically.
Yeah.
Thinking like, oh, this is crazy. Like people, their whole families do this. This is so dangerous. And I'm like, who am I talking about? Like this is exactly what we do and how people probably talk about us.
It's not like I was a lawyer and decided to get a race car one day. Went from one extreme to another, but
there's a lot of parallels, I would say.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time.
No,
Nick
you're welcome.
is
Thank
a good
you for
friend
having
of
me.
ours and coach and boss formerly, and you're always there with Corey his whole fight week. I take a lot of solace in that, knowing you're there with him. So we appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, and we got more fights and races to come.
Thanks again, Nick, for taking the time. I appreciate it. I enjoyed your story. Hope everyone else does as well. You can check out Nick's gym at nickcatonefitness.com. It's an amazing facility if you're in the New Jersey Brick area. He has a lot of fighters, too, that compete for the CFFC. You can watch them there. And for everyone else, you can listen to any old podcasts that I have or interviews that I have at firstfightpodcast.com. And follow us on Instagram at @thefirstfight. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll be back with some more interesting stories.